Lisa Whitmore gave Aiden Miller a place to call home, but behind closed doors, their twisted bond turned deadly, and her own son, Daniel, was the first to uncover the truth. Lisa Whitmore had always considered herself fortunate to live in the quiet suburb of Maple Heights, a neighborhood where every lawn was trimmed, every neighbor waved, and secrets never lasted long, or so she thought. She was a single mother, widowed at just 30 after a car accident took her husband's life. Since then, she had poured every ounce of her energy into raising her only son, Daniel. He was her world, a bright, well-mannered high school senior with dreams of becoming an architect. Their bond was something people in the neighborhood often admired. It was unbreakable, honest, and full of love. To the outside world, their lives looked peaceful and complete, a rare picture of harmony in a world so often stained with chaos. Their modest two-story home sat at the end of a tree-lined cul-de-sac, tucked safely between two larger houses, whose owners hosted annual barbecues and holiday light contests. Lisa kept to herself mostly, maintaining a tidy yard, baking cookies for school fundraisers, and driving Daniel to soccer practice and part-time jobs. She was known for her calm demeanor, her warm smile, and her absolute devotion to her son. If anyone had asked, they would have said Lisa was a model parent, maybe even a little too perfect. Daniel, too, had earned a quiet reputation. He was kind, intelligent, and dependable, with a circle of friends that was small but loyal. His best friend, Aiden Miller, was practically a second son in the Whitmore household. Aiden had been Daniel's closest companion since elementary school, and as they grew older, their bond only strengthened. Aiden's home life, however, was far from ideal. His parents were divorced, constantly arguing over custody and finances. He often showed up late to school and sometimes had bruises he refused to explain. Lisa noticed, as any caring adult would. She offered Aiden a safe space, welcoming him into their home for dinners, study sessions, and even weekend sleepovers. At first it seemed like a good thing. Daniel was happier with Aiden around, and Lisa, who still felt the sting of loneliness from time to time, enjoyed having the house full of youthful energy. Aiden helped around the house, called her Whitmore with a teasing smile, and always seemed grateful for her kindness. He was polite, attentive, and slowly became a regular presence, so regular, in fact, that no one batted an eye when he started spending more nights at the Whitmore home than his own. Still, behind the smiles and routines, something subtle had begun to shift. Small things at first. A glance held too long, a conversation that lingered after Daniel went to bed. Lisa didn't notice it immediately, or perhaps she did but chose to ignore it. She told herself she was simply being compassionate, that she was filling in a parental role where one was missing. But as the weeks passed, the warmth between her and Aiden started to feel different, and though no one said anything out loud, the air in that perfect little house had started to change, quietly, unseen, and dangerously. By the time summer arrived, Aiden was spending more time at the Whitmore house than at his own. He'd keep clothes in Daniel's closet, help Lisa cook dinner, and even pick up groceries when she needed a hand. Lisa began setting a place for him at the table, without asking if he'd be around. She packed lunches for 2 boys instead of 1, and bought snacks she knew Aiden liked. His presence became a constant in their home, and no one questioned the arrangement. Not the neighbors, not Daniel, and certainly not Aiden. What Lisa told herself, again and again, was that she was simply being kind, that she was offering a safe place to a boy who had no stability elsewhere. She felt sorry for him, she admired his resilience, and somewhere along the way, she began to depend on him too. He would compliment her cooking, ask about her day, and offer to help with things Daniel often neglected. He made her feel seen, appreciated, and though she never said it out loud, Lisa started to look forward to those moments when Daniel would fall asleep, and she and Aiden would stay up a bit longer talking, just the two of them. The conversations changed over time. They drifted from light-hearted banter to more personal confessions. Aiden shared stories about his fractured family, his fears about the future, and how different he felt around her, calmer, safer, happier. Lisa, in return, began sharing details she hadn't spoken of in years. Her loneliness, her regrets, her sense of fading identity since becoming just Daniel's mom. These weren't things she had ever discussed with anyone, let alone a teenager. But Aiden listened. He listened in a way that made her feel young again, important, even desired. By the end of that summer, the dynamic had shifted in a way that neither of them openly acknowledged, yet both silently recognized. They spent more time alone. Aiden's gaze lingered longer than it should have. Lisa noticed. She noticed everything. The way he looked at her, the way he sat a little closer on the couch, the way his compliments grew more specific. What once was a motherly bond was becoming something blurred, complicated and deeply inappropriate. Daniel, busy with college applications and part-time work, remained oblivious to the undercurrent developing between his best friend and his mother. And Lisa, while still going through the motions of daily life, had crossed a line in her heart she couldn't uncross. What started as a rescue turned into something neither of them could control. The turning point came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, when Daniel got home from school earlier than usual. He had forgotten his art portfolio and needed to retrieve it before his evening class. The house was unusually quiet. Lisa was out running errands, and Aiden was nowhere to be seen. Daniel went to the living room, where he often tossed his backpack, and noticed a notebook wedged under the couch cushion. It had a black cover, frayed edges, and no name on the front. Curious, he picked it up. At first, he thought it was just another one of Aiden's sketchbooks. Aiden liked to doodle, dragons, landscapes, faces from movies. But as Daniel flipped through the pages, it became clear that this was something else. Among the scattered drawings were journal entries. Some were written in blocky capital letters, others in rushed cursive. He read slowly, the words making less and less sense the further he went, not because they were hard to understand, but because they felt so foreign, so wrong. A few entries mentioned dreams, strange ones, involving Lisa. One line read, "She smiled at me again. I think she knows. I don't care anymore." Another said, "Daniel doesn't see it. He never sees anything. But I think she does." There were pages filled with what looked like love letters, but they weren't signed or addressed directly. Still, the references were unmistakable. Her favorite perfume, the robe she wore in the morning, the sound of her voice. Some parts were deeply unsettling, describing late-night interactions and unspoken feelings that had clearly gone beyond friendship. Daniel felt his heart drop, his stomach twisted as he continued to read. His hands trembled. It wasn't just admiration, it was obsession. And worse, the tone of the writing made it seem mutual, as if Aiden believed Lisa felt the same. He couldn't believe what he was reading. He closed the notebook quickly, as if that would erase what he had just seen. For a moment he sat there frozen on the couch, notebook in his lap, his mind racing. Daniel hid the notebook in his backpack and said nothing when Lisa returned home an hour later. He sat at the dinner table that night, barely touching his food, silently observing. He watched how Aiden avoided his eyes, how Lisa smiled too much, too carefully. It was like watching a movie he had already seen the ending to. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right. Something was broken now, and Daniel couldn't unsee it. The truth had started to surface, and he knew it was only a matter of time before it tore everything apart. The weight of the journal pressed on Daniel's mind for days. Every glance, every smile, every shared moment between his mother and Aiden now carried a shadow of doubt. He started to see things differently. Small gestures that once seemed harmless now felt loaded with hidden meaning. The way his mom paused when Aiden spoke, how she stood just a little too close when handing him a plate, or how Aiden would linger in the kitchen long after Daniel had gone upstairs. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was confirmation, though still unspoken, that something dark had unfolded under his own roof. He wrestled with the idea of confronting either of them. His loyalty was torn in two. On one side was Aiden, his best friend since childhood, the person he trusted with everything. On the other was his mother, the only parent he had left. The thought of accusing them felt like betrayal, but staying silent felt worse. The journal had poisoned the space between them. Even the walls of their home, once comforting, now felt cold and deceptive. One evening, after days of emotional turmoil, Daniel finally spoke. It was brief, almost whispered, and delivered without emotion. He was standing in the kitchen while his mother was washing dishes. With his eyes fixed on the floor, he asked, "What was your secret with Aiden?" The question hung in the air like smoke. The water kept running for a moment longer before Lisa dropped the glass she was holding. It shattered in the sink, and she stood motionless, her back to him. She didn't answer. She didn't even turn around. Her silence was louder than any confession. Her hands began to tremble, and Daniel saw her shoulders rise and fall as if she were holding her breath or holding something back. He waited, heart pounding, for her to deny it, explain it, or even laugh it off. But nothing came. Only a long, heavy silence that confirmed what he feared most. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and left the room without a word, closing her bedroom door behind her. That night, Aiden didn't come over. He didn't call or text. He didn't show up the next day either, or the next. It was as if he had vanished. Daniel tried reaching out, but there was no response. He checked social media. Nothing new. Aiden's last message was from days ago, casual and brief. The lack of contact only deepened Daniel's unease. Lisa, meanwhile, withdrew into herself. She moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding eye contact and conversation. Her usual calm was replaced by nervous energy. She kept double-checking that the doors were locked, jumped at sudden sounds, and left the TV on all night. Daniel noticed her checking the front window often, peeking through the curtains as if expecting someone or something. 2 days had passed since Aiden's sudden disappearance, and his absence had become more than just noticeable. It was alarming. Daniel waited for a message, a call, anything that would explain why his best friend had vanished without a word. But his phone remained silent. He checked Aiden's usual hangouts, the skate park, the library, even the gas station down the road where Aiden sometimes bought snacks late at night. No one had seen him. His social media accounts were frozen. His phone rang but didn't go to voicemail. It was as if he had simply evaporated. At first, Daniel assumed Aiden was avoiding him, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear. But as time went on, that explanation no longer held up. Aiden would have said something. He wouldn't have just disappeared. Something was wrong, and Daniel could feel it deep in his bones. The tension in the house was thicker than ever. Lisa barely spoke, and when she did, her words were flat and rehearsed. She asked Daniel how school was, whether he'd eaten, but avoided any mention of Aiden altogether. It was unnatural, and Daniel noticed. That evening, Aiden's father called. He asked if Daniel had heard from his son. Daniel told him the truth. No one had. Within hours, a missing person report was filed. Flyers were printed and taped across town. Police visited the Whitmore home, asking questions that Lisa answered calmly, almost too calmly. She told them Aiden hadn't stayed over in a few days, that they hadn't spoken recently. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. Daniel watched his mother closely during the interview. He noticed how she avoided his eyes, how she kept adjusting the slivers of her sweater even when they weren't slipping. The police left without suspicion, but Daniel didn't feel relieved. If anything, he felt worse. Something about her calm didn't feel like composure, it felt like concealment. That night, Daniel retrieved the notebook again. He flipped through it slowly, paying closer attention this time. Some entries mentioned a fight, vague hints about a falling out, an argument that hadn't been detailed before. One particular sentence chilled him. "I think she's scared now. I said too much. Maybe I pushed her too far." The page was dated just days before Aiden disappeared. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by unanswered questions. What had Aiden meant? What had he said that scared her? Did his mother know more than she was admitting? The next morning, Lisa acted as if nothing was wrong. She made breakfast, asked if Daniel wanted eggs, and smiled as though their lives hadn't shifted into a slow-moving nightmare. Daniel couldn't take it anymore. Every word she spoke felt like a lie wrapped in politeness. Later that day, he returned home to find Lisa sitting on the back porch, staring out at the garden. She didn't notice him watching her. Her eyes were distant, filled with something between sorrow and fear. It was then that Daniel realized his mother wasn't just hiding something. She was terrified of what might come next. The investigation into Aiden's disappearance quickly gained traction. As the days dragged on with no leads, the police intensified their efforts. Friends were questioned, teachers were interviewed, and surveillance cameras in nearby streets were checked. But nothing led to any useful information. Aiden had vanished without a trace, and the pressure was mounting. Detectives returned to the Whitmore residence, this time with sharper focus. Lisa once again maintained her calm, answering every question as if reading from a script. She claimed she hadn't seen Aiden since the previous weekend, that she had no idea where he might have gone, and that she too was worried. But something in her eyes betrayed her. It wasn't just worry, it was fear. Not the fear of a mother concerned for a missing boy, but the fear of a person hiding something heavy. The detectives, trained to read more than just words, took notice. One of them asked for permission to search the home. Lisa hesitated, only for a second, but it was enough to raise a silent red flag. Still she agreed. She had to. The search began in the common areas, turning up nothing out of the ordinary. The living room, kitchen, bedrooms all looked clean and typical, almost too typical. But when investigators checked the family's desktop computer in Lisa's study, the tone of the investigation shifted instantly. A technician noticed a hidden folder buried deep inside the hard drive. At first glance, it seemed protected by a password. But it wasn't encrypted, just tucked away where most people wouldn't think to look. Inside the folder were dozens of video files, each labeled with random dates and numbers. The files spanned over a year and varied in length. When detectives opened the first one, the room went quiet. The footage was grainy but clear enough to show everything. It appeared to be taken from a hidden camera placed in the living room. In the video, Lisa and Aiden were sitting on the couch. At first they simply talked, but as the video progressed, the conversation shifted, and their body language told a story no one wanted to believe. Aiden touched her arm. She didn't pull away. They laughed, whispered, leaned in closer. It was unmistakable. Their relationship had crossed the line long ago. File after file revealed the same pattern. Late-night conversations, soft touches, moments of intimacy that no mother and teenage boy should ever share. The dates matched nights Daniel remembered Aiden staying over. It was all there, documented in chilling detail. The worst part wasn't just what was caught on camera, it was the fact that Lisa had recorded it herself. When the lead detective questioned Lisa about the videos, she said nothing. Her face went pale, and she lowered her head into her hands. She didn't deny their existence. She didn't offer excuses. For the first time, she was silent, not composed, not careful, just silent. The facade she had maintained for so long had finally cracked. The discovery of the footage shattered any remaining doubt. This wasn't just a case of disappearance anymore. It was a story of manipulation, obsession, and control. And now, it was no longer just about where Aiden had gone, but what had been done to silence him. The day the cadaver dogs were brought to the Whitmore property, everything changed. It was early morning when the forensic team arrived with marked vans and solemn faces. The neighborhood, once quiet and untouched by tragedy, now buzzed with murmurs and cautious glances through drawn curtains. Lisa stood on the front porch as they approached, her arms folded tightly across her chest, her knuckles pale. She said nothing when they informed her of the next steps. She simply nodded and stepped aside. The dogs, trained to detect the faintest trace of human remains, were led through the house first. They sniffed every room, every hallway, but gave no indication inside. Then they were taken outside, into the backyard, a modest space with a small garden, a tool shed, and an aging wooden fence. The sun was out, but the mood was heavy. The lead dog stopped near the far corner of the yard, beside a patch of recently disturbed soil near a cluster of rose bushes. It pawed at the ground, growling softly, then sat, alert. Officers moved in quickly. The area was cordoned off with yellow tape. Shovels were brought in. Lisa stood at the kitchen window, watching in silence as the digging began. Daniel sat at the dining table, frozen, his face pale, his hands clenched around the arms of the chair. He didn't ask any questions. Deep down, he already knew the answer. As the first few layers of dirt were removed, the unmistakable scent of decay filled the air. A few more shovelfuls revealed something wrapped in white fabric, tightly bundled, bound at the ends. The digging stopped. One officer stepped back and called it in. A moment later, Lisa collapsed to the floor, not from shock, but from the weight of finally being caught. The bundle was carefully lifted and examined. The sheet was stained with soil and something darker. When it was partially unwrapped, there was no doubt it was Aiden. His body showed signs of strangulation, bruising around the neck, defensive marks on his arms. There was no sign of a struggle outside the grave, indicating he had likely been killed inside the house before being buried in secret. News spread quickly, neighbors wept, reporters lined the street. The town, so proud of its safety and simplicity, now carried the stain of a horrifying crime. Lisa was arrested on the spot, handcuffed, pale and shaking. She offered no resistance. Daniel watched from the living room as the officers led his mother away. She didn't look back at him. She didn't say a word. The backyard, once a place of quiet mornings and summer barbecues, was now a crime scene. The roses, still in bloom, stood as silent witnesses to something no one could have imagined. And Daniel, torn between grief and fury, realized that the people he loved most had betrayed him in the most irreversible way possible. The truth was buried, literally, but it had clawed its way back to the surface. The trial of Lisa Whitmore became the talk of the entire state. Media vans crowded the courthouse, reporters fighting for space, as the public followed every twist of the horrifying case. The once respected single mother, who neighbors described as warm and nurturing, now stood accused of murder, sexual misconduct, and evidence tampering. The courtroom was packed on the first day, and every day after. People came not just to hear the verdict, but to try to understand how such a horrifying betrayal could happen behind the walls of such a seemingly perfect home. The prosecution laid out the timeline with surgical precision. They presented the video files found on Lisa's computer, confirming the illicit relationship that had gone on for months. Forensic analysts testified about the grave in the backyard, the signs of struggle, and the state of Aiden's body. The autopsy confirmed strangulation as the cause of death, likely from a belt or cord. Aiden had bruises on his wrists, and fragments of fingernails embedded in the cloth he was wrapped in. He had fought back, but not for long. Lisa's defense team argued emotional instability and blurred boundaries, citing her grief from losing her husband and years of loneliness. But no excuse could erase the evidence. She had not only crossed a line, she had destroyed a life. Her silence after Aiden's death spoke volumes. No 911, no confession, just a cold and calculated attempt to bury the truth, both literally and emotionally. Daniel was called to testify. The courtroom fell silent as he took the stand. He was composed, but the pain was visible in his eyes. He recounted finding the journal, noticing the strange tension, and asking his mother the question that started everything unraveling. His voice only faltered when he described the moment Aiden disappeared. How the silence was louder than any scream and how he had felt the shift in his world without knowing why. The betrayal cut deeper than anyone in the room could imagine. The final blow came when the court played a recorded confession Lisa had made during a police interview after her arrest. In it, she admitted to the relationship, claimed she had tried to end it, and said Aiden threatened to tell Daniel everything. That, she said, was the moment she lost control. Her voice cracked, but she never apologized. It was self-pity, not remorse. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours. Lisa was found guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The judge called her actions a betrayal of maternal trust so severe that it destroyed multiple lives. In the weeks that followed, Daniel left town. He couldn't bear the whispers, the questions, or the eyes that watched him with pity. The house was sold, the garden was ripped out. The rose bushes, once symbols of warmth, had been removed by the new owners. No trace remained of the life he once knew. Aiden was buried quietly by his family. No large ceremony, no headlines. Just a quiet goodbye to a boy whose story ended far too early. And for Daniel, the only son of a mother who had ruined everything, there were no answers, only the ache of knowing he would never fully understand how love had turned into something so monstrous.